Welcome to the Au Jus. I'm your host, Beefloaf. This show is being powered by From the 108 and FromThe108.com, where you can get all of our content top to bottom, blogs, podcasts, and videos, including the world-famous Sunday Soak. You can also get all of our merch there as well, including our infamous Wave Sucks and hashtag 108 in Garb. Currently, I have a promotion going on that you don't want to miss. It's called the Au Jus promotion, where you get a chance to win $250 cold hard cash. It's running right now. Go to my Twitter handle. That's at MRDELICIOUS13. That's right. That's Mr. Delicious. That's all the details there on Twitter. This show is powered by you, the loyal 108 supporter. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to tickle the undercarriage in the process. Like, comment, turn on notifications, and most definitely super chat. That's how we get paid. It's how we continue to make the content that you know and love. Tonight's guest. He's the senior editor and co-host of the podcast Over Future Sox, which is now part of SoxMachine. He's been my main adversary in Jose Abreu commentary for the last half decade, and he is amusingly annoyed by basically anything that Bruce Levine has to say on the radio. James Fox, welcome to the Au Jus.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Great to talk to you. Great to finally get you on here. I had Rankin on about 2.5 months ago, and the reason why I had him on before you, no offense, is I owed him one, man. You've been on 108 stuff. You've been on our variety shows, 108 Day when we had it remotely. You've been on the regular show talking prospects. I hadn't had Mike on. I'm like, Mike's had me on this show a couple times. I'm like, fuck, I got to get my man on there. And he was great. He did a really nice job coming on this show.
Yeah, he's always good. I feel like underutilized too. I feel like people ask for me like all the time, and I'm like, you could get Mike. Mike's good.
Yeah, and Mike, you and Mike don't have the same angle, so that's what's nice. Like, and lately I've noticed, just me, you guys have moved over to SoxMachine, and the podcast is over there, and all the content's over there. I've noticed, if you don't mind me saying so, as someone who does podcasting too, a maturation of the podcast. I love the direction you guys are going, and you guys have always been good at taking what prospect people say, distilling that language and allowing the rest of us to absorb it, because there is like this barrier to language with prospects that I think you guys do a good job of breaking down and diving into. But I see more and more, we're going to get into some of this in a little bit, you guys have, takes on guys. You guys have, okay, this is a guy that I really like, and you'll back off of certain guys, even if they're popular, if you don't think, the helium is as strong on them. So credit to you guys for continuing to reinvent yourselves with that podcast.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, sometimes like I've always kind of been careful just because of like some of the people that follow us, I would say, right? Like I'm not gonna like I can swear on this podcast, so that's good. Like I'm not gonna like shit all over some prospect that like I think might be an org guy because their aunts and uncles all follow us and like want the best info, right? But
of course, yes.
But I mean, you do kind of have. I'm not going to tell you like the guy's going to make the big leagues, like if I don't think he's going to make the big leagues. So
that's exactly right. Now you have moved over to SoxMachine. I had to get this out of you. This was like the first question that came to mind. Who is a bigger pain in the ass to work with? Is it Josh or Jim? Tell me straight. Shoot me straight here, James.
I mean, who do you think it is? So this is what I will say. Like it's been great going with those guys just because of like me and Mike. Like, look, Mike doesn't write that often, and I don't know if people like notice that, right? So we're at Future Sox, we're doing our own thing, we got our own crew, but like there's all these breaking news pieces, and like I'm a teacher, and not everybody knows that, but I think most people do. 2:00 in the afternoon, if the White Sox trade for Franklin German, like I can't exactly write. So that was like one of the that's the best thing about having Jim. Jim will write anything. Like literally anything, and and like doing it. So Josh, me and Josh have got into some spirited debates before, and I love working with him. The funniest thing about Josh, and this is why I'll say he's the biggest pain in the ass. The funniest thing is like since I don't really tweet during the day because of my day job and whatnot, he always just he hits stuff head on, right? And then he's got like a Twitter Spaces going anytime something happens. So sometimes he'll say things that are very controversial on Twitter. And now that me and him are like lumped together as partners, sometimes I get roped into those things and I have a bunch of DMs like, hey, did you see what Josh said? Or like people think that me and him should agree on everything because we both work at SoxMachine. Right. So I would say it's that like middle of the day, like I go to look for Bears news or whatever. And like I got a bunch of messages and DMs because of something Josh Nelson said at 1:30 in the afternoon. Yeah, usually something related to that.
I love it. I would have guessed him, and as a lot of the people listening here go, we've done a lot of work with SoxMachine over the last 3 to 5 years. We've worked together on lots of different projects. We kind of like work side by side and stuff. We have great synergies as groups. Like, I think for us, we pull some of the fun out of those. Those guys are hilarious and super witty and everything. We pull that out of them. And when we do things with them, it forces Treasy and I to really sharpen our pencils and make sure we come with good information. But I would have guessed Josh only because when we plan something, he starts planning it like 9 months before it's going to happen. It's like, bro, take it easy, all right? This shit is like a year away, man. It's like, for someone and me and my sex, someone got kids, and you do too, James. It's like, fuck, I'm trying to live through this week. I don't know what's going to happen out that far out, you know. So yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah, I've heard what is it? The years go by quick, but the days are long, man. Like long. Yeah.
100%. That's 100% correct. Thanks for the drink, Herb Lawrence gets some drinks here. He says, "Love this. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you for the super chat, Herbie." Good to see the White Sox community coming together. Before we jump into specific players, I wanted to get into it with you a little bit, James. How do you put together the list, the top 30 list? I know it's a collaborative process. How does it work specifically? And then if you get into the point where you have arguments, or do you even have discussions amongst the group when you're putting it together?
Yeah, sometimes. So I'm actually glad, like you can use maybe your accounting here. You can tell me if this makes any sense. But so like six of us participated this time. Sometimes people bow out, they just don't feel comfortable, or the system's bad and they don't feel like doing it. Because I will say, like, you could probably rank to 11 right now, and then it gets really hard. Like, that's what I said. I'm like, man, right. Like I can get to 11 in some order and not really complain about any of it. But then prospects after that are really hard. So I did a thing that MLB Pipeline does where you assign prospect points, essentially 1 through 30. So just however many first place votes you get 30 points. So Colson Montgomery had 180 points. It's pretty
pretty easy, straightforward.
So it's pretty self-explanatory, right? So then Oscar Colas or Ramos would get 29, depending. And then we had a ton of guys with 1 and 2 and 3, right? And then you just kind of added it together. And then I will say, me and Mike do tinker with the list at the end because, I feel like it's going to be us that kind of like have to answer the questions about it. So we're like, hey, I don't really like this. Like, talk to the group. Like, I'm going to move this guy up. And it's never really like a argument. So, but there were some late additions to that list that we can get into when you bring up some of the guys you're going to talk about that made it a little bit easier to do 30.
Yeah, that's what I find interesting too, is like getting that deep. You're right. And when I look at these lists, and I've been looking at them kind of across the groups too. I mean, I think I don't have a Baseball America sub, but I've looked at Fangraphs. I've looked at everybody who's got it, MLB Pipeline, everyone. You see quite a bit of disparity, but as far as the group, generally that top 10 group is mixed and matched in there. You might have one guy out that is in on another one, but you're right. The deeper and deeper you get on these things, there's a lot of variability in picking. And one thing I've noticed over the years, just like following from far away, is some people really value total upside and push that to the forefront. Some people value more like kind of the certainty of a prospect being, a baseline level of player. So it's interesting to see. Do you have any large disparities amongst your internal group where some person is very heavy on the, this person's close to the majors, I'm shoving them up, or the opposite? They're going to pick all the kids that just signed their international contracts and push them up because it's like, okay, they got the upside.
So I will say, I think it happened with Sean Burke with us. Like, I think we have him 9, and a lot of publications had him like 5, because like Sean Burke's going to pitch in the big leagues this year, right? But if I think Sean Burke's really close to the big leagues, so proximity to the majors does come into play. But if I think he's a number 5 starter, like I might put him lower than Christian Mena or Schultz or like one of these other guys. And look, there's 5 hitters. Like, I'll generally put hitters that I think are going to play in the big leagues like ahead of pitchers in most cases, like unless it's a front of the rotation guy type thing. And I think Schultz probably has the highest upside. So yeah, I would say him, but that's like often a debate. And it was really hard towards the last couple of years when you'd have like your Gavin Sheets and Jake Burgers, right? Because you're ranking guys at like 17 in a decent system, but like they're going to help the big league team. That doesn't make sense to people. A good one last year was with Josh, actually. Like, Josh pushed really hard for Davis Martin.
Davis Martin. Yeah, I was going to say the midseason. He had him like 4th or 5th or something, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like, I get where he's coming from. Like, this dude is probably the best pitching prospect right now, right? But it's still a limited ceiling guy. So it's tough to rank. And like Carlos Perez is a perfect guy. Carlos Perez is one of those guys. I didn't rank Carlos Perez because I think Carlos Perez is a backup catcher. So like maybe the system's bad enough where a backup catcher should rank. I just found 30 guys that I like better. But that's a good example of it.
All right, that makes sense. Little Yumper, he says, salute. Thanks for the drink, Yump. Appreciate you. I do want to put up the image. So I'm going to put up an image of the prospects just so that everyone who is in the YouTube can get a look at this, just a quick look as we start going through these. If you're listening on the podcast feed, I've got links to the articles for the top 15 and the 16 to 30, as well as adjustments. We're going to get into all the various player pools there. My first question for you, Colson Montgomery, he's number one with a bullet far and away. It's not even close. Some of the top 100 lists are shoving him up there kind of close to the top 10. My mental framework, I got him as a major leaguer already in some capacity. So I want you, James, to do something for me. I want you to paint me the best case scenario of Colson Montgomery as a major leaguer, and then also the worst case scenario. Because I think he's basically there, but I think there's a wide bars on what it could be.
So I think the best case is like super optimistic. Like you hear the Corey Seager comp like on draft night, and everybody's like, oh, okay, fine, he looks like Corey Seager, great. But he literally like, that's like the type of player where like if this goes right, like I don't know if it's quite as much power as Corey Seager, right? Okay. But if he stays and a lot of people think he can stay at shortstop, and when guys like Keith Law say it, I'm like, okay, because I really trust him with like hitters. I mean, yeah, that's the type of like first division regular at shortstop. Like he's like Colson Montgomery's top 20 prospect in baseball. Now, you asked about the floor too. And in some cases, like, it's like, well, he doesn't get out of AA, right? But with the White Sox, I feel like we're already past the point of no return. Like he's playing for the White Sox.
I agree.
Right?
100%.
So even if he's not that good, right, we'll see like a Gordon Beckham scenario where it's like he's going to be in the big leagues and we're going to love him. And then if he stinks, we're going to hate him. And then he's going to keep playing, and then he's going to get traded, and then they'll re-sign him 3 years later to back up at third, or, like it'll be a situation. So I'm with you. Like barring injury, he's playing in the majors. And part of that's due to like the organization that drafted him.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting because my brain, I agree with you at being an optimal player. Another thing I was thinking about too with shortstop, I've read a lot of stuff on him, and there are some scouts that are like, well, he just doesn't have the footwork, isn't there, he's not going to stay there. But I thought to myself too, though, some of it too could just be, well, the guy hits a ton, and if you have a good third baseman next to him, you just keep him there, even if he's not a great defender. So what if he's he's the 20th best defender out of 30 shortstops? Who gives a shit? If he hits the hell out of the ball and he can play enough of the position, maybe you're fine with that in the end.
Well, and it's not the worst case scenario if he gets too big to play and he's really good at third, right? I mean, it's fine. Like it's a 22nd pick in the draft, and they did if it works. Like what? It's a feather in their cap, right? Because like Mike Shirley knew who he was because he loves Indiana players, right? But Mike Shirley is the only one that knew that this guy probably would have went a lot higher if he played baseball year round on the showcase circuit and did all that stuff. Instead, he played 3 sports and thought he was going to play basketball at Indiana. So I just think he's a lot better than people thought he was. And I think with like some of the like all the walks and his patience at the plate, that's the stuff that people didn't really know. I feel like. I didn't either. Right. I mean, I didn't either. Like prospect people didn't know. Like all they talked about was how old he was.
Yeah, they're focusing on one data point, and all the rest came in rows above it. That's great. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to him. Another guy I'm looking forward to, a guy I put some money down already on, is Oscar Colas. I heard you on the Future Sox podcast articulating a point about how Oscar Colas is probably going to need to learn this last step in the major leagues. He's not going to be as useful spending some time in AAA. Could you explain that to me?
Well, so when I saw some of it, like in a James Fegan article that Andy Barquette, talked to, he's the minor league hitting coordinator. We had him on like last year. I really liked what he had to say. And he kind of just thought that Oscar Colas like goes up to the plate and just assumes that he's better than the pitcher that's throwing to him. And I think in the minors, like that's kind of been true. And I kind of feel like at Charlotte, it's going to be true too. And like it's that offensive atmosphere. I just worry about certain guys, right? Because you go there and you can still have all your flaws, like take form, and you still OPS like over 800 because that place is crazy, right? So if it is like, look, he chases way too much, it's probably going to be way too many strikeouts. But I mean, like, I just don't think sending him to Charlotte for a month is going to fix that stuff. Is my point, right? So, if he's rough at the beginning, like with the White Sox, and then he figures it out, great, because I feel like he would go down for a month, come up, then be rough for May instead of April, and then maybe finally figure it out. So yeah, he's their best option in right field. He needs to be there, and all indications seem to be like, I think he will. I'd kind of be surprised at this point if he's not on the team.
Yeah, I agree. And the only thing I was nervous about with him, and I'm a big fan too. The power is outrageous. He's a good athlete. We know he can play right field. I was worried that he would come to spring training and have some rough at bats, and then there'd be question. But that hasn't been the case. He's been totally under control. The power hasn't shown up yet, but he's looked good. He's looked the part at the plate in spring training. So I have no concerns. Yeah. I'm assuming, when we get over here on April 3rd or whatever it is for the home opener, he's going to be right in front of me in right field in front of the 108. I love it.
I think so, and that's why I've been asking guests. Like we have Jim Callis on the show tomorrow, Tuesday,
okay,
and then some others too. Just like, what do they think the White Sox needed to see from him? Because there were some preparations. He needs to prepare and do it. Like listen to what they're telling him and follow game plans and things along those lines. Like I was just hoping that spring training stats weren't going to be what made the team, right? Because we all remember the Jacob May spring training, right? Like it's just so pointless and stupid. Like I'm glad it's not like, oh, he hit 380, he deserves to make the team. It's like, no, just have the plan B for him to be on the team. And if you legitimately think he's not ready to take big league at bats, fine. But I just didn't think that was going to be the case.
And I agree with you totally on spring training. I try not to watch it. I don't want to fool myself into thinking something I shouldn't think about watching it. So I don't want to go and see a guy go 3 for 3. He's like, oh man, this guy, he's something here. No, I try to stay away as best I can. Nathan Sheba, thank you for the drink. He says, I'm paying for my own drink because James just depressed me with the Gordon Beckham comment. I asked James to give worst case scenario, right? Nathan, so Gordon Beckham, his worst case scenario is pretty solid for a guy who's still in Double-A.
Yeah, making the big leagues is pretty good floor, I think.
Yeah, I mean, my mind actually with him went to someone like Connor Gillespie, where they're kind of a meh third baseman. They'll hit a little bit for average. I think that's the bottom, but I agree with you. The upsides are tremendous. Now, getting on to another guy. This is a guy I know that you're in love with, and I love your strong feelings about him. It makes me feel like, man, this guy's going to be better than you. I think he would be, and that's Lenyn Sosa. Why do you love Sosa so much, and what are the analysts missing on him right now?
So I just really like the swing change, and I talked to Jim Margulis a lot because he went down and saw him in person and interviewed him, and it just looks different. He was all hands before. He looked like kind of a backup infielder that maybe would make the big leagues, but definitely as a utility guy, and maybe not even that, right? Well, then he hits 24 homers. I always just, when you go to Double-A and demolish Double-A, it just raises an eyebrow for me because it's where White Sox prospects used to go to literally die. It was okay, they'd go to I'd want to skip Birmingham to trick myself and let him go to Charlotte, right? But and he literally hit there, and then he went to the big leagues, and we all saw what happened. And I don't know, I'd like to think that people aren't buying too much into that tiny big league sample that didn't mean anything, right? Because then he went to Charlotte, struggled initially he has forever, and then he was great down the stretch. I'm expecting him to, have a 800 OPS at Charlotte, and we're going to be why isn't he the second baseman when Elvis Andrews has a 550 OPS through April? So
yes.
No, it is weird because look, he's been top 10 for everybody. I think he's closer to 4 or 5-ish, near Brian Ramos, and a lot of people had him 9 or 10. If you think he's a utility guy, I guess that's probably the reason, right? I think he can play second and start there for somebody. He actually reminds me a lot of Marcus Semien. That's pretty lofty, right?
That's high praise. That's right.
But it's he hit 24 homers in the mind. I just think even if he swings too much, he has enough power to where if he's a decent defender at second, you're a regular.
Yeah, right. No, that's absolutely right. And just pulling the list back up. Yeah, for your list, he was 5, nestled right between Noah Schultz at 4 and Jose Rodriguez at 7. I want to get into this next group, and people who are watching on YouTube could see on the screen. This is the 7 through 10. This is Christian Mena, Peyton Pallette, Sean Burke, and Norge Vera, all right-handed pitchers, all nestled very tightly together there. And my question for you, and we brought it up a little bit in the beginning here, is how do you end up with these guys here with varying levels of early returns on their prospect status, with Pallette being just a draft pick and it's super new, and guys like Sean Burke who are super close to the major leagues, a guy who kind of was shot out of a cannon to do this stuff. I mean, he's a recent draftee, and now he's going to be starting the year in AAA more than likely.
Yeah, so I will say Pallette's really tough to rank because if you paid attention last year to the draft, he was a top 25 draft prospect for most of the year. He was going to be a first rounder, and then he had Tommy John. Sox signed him for $1.5 million in the second round. So if you told me that that Peyton Pallette's their best pitching prospect a year from now, I'd be okay, yeah, I would totally believe that. Yeah. So he was a little bit tough to rank because I feel Mena deserve to rank higher just because of like some of the minor league success he had. And
Yeah,
he's
results.
and he's fairly safe too. Like you know, he's probably not going to be an ace, but like I think he's probably going to pitch in the big leagues. And then Burke is, you know, close to the big leagues, but might not have like the upside that the other guys have. And then Vera was a mess last year. I mean, he just like has to pitch. Like he threw 35 innings last year. His stuff towards the end of the year was he was throwing like 90, 91, you know, after throwing 100 in the Dominican Summer League. So he had a lat issue. He was hurt. One of the things that we've talked about a lot on the podcast is like how quickly do you just like pivot and make him like a high leverage reliever? It's probably too early this year. But I mean, if it's another inning or another year where he's just like hurt and throws 45 innings or something, I mean, that guy could be an 8th inning guy with a fastball splitter. I mean, he could be, and it's not like you drafted him, like, you know, you spent up 1.5 million internationally, but I mean, you could hike that guy to the big leagues quickly if you know, didn't have like the starter dream.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not hanging on to that, and Joey P in the comments asks who has at least the upside to be a number 3 starter out of that foursome, and I'll bring them back up on the board as we talk about it.
I mean, well, does it include Paulette or no? I would say him. If
including Paulette. Yeah, so all 7 through 10 there. So
definitely Paulette. Yeah, and he could be. You know, he gets the Walker Buehler comps beef. I'm not going that far, but
I mean, that's if you got them for $1.5 million and you know, and later on, that's a great get at $1.5 million in the draft. I mean,
he's one of these guys where like he doesn't have any innings, and that's like good and bad, right? Like he's already had Tommy John, which I think is a positive because all these guys are likely going to have Tommy John. So the fact that he's had it like before you got him, I think is good. So he'll be limited a little bit this year, but then he could go really quick after that as a college guy.
Yeah, I'm actually most intrigued right now by Burke, and the reason why I actually read an article recently by Joe Sheehan, and he was talking about there's no such thing as a pitching prospect theory. And I think it's Gary Huckabee's theory back from the early days of Baseball Prospectus. And in the context, and the way it works is the reason there's no pitching prospect is if a guy's pitching well enough where they're mowing down, they should just be in the majors. They're a pitcher already. Or the injury aspect, right? Guys get injured so quickly. And with Burke, it seems like they've kind of rushed him here. And by listening to you guys, you on Future Sox, you made sure to be careful not to scout the stat line too tightly on Burke because they had him working on some things. But the fact that he's going to be more than likely in Charlotte to start the year, is there any reason at all that if he starts out hot and is looking good in the first 5-10 starts and you got a spot open up, I mean, you just bring him up, right? I mean, like there's no rush. Maybe you do Davis Martin was here first, you kind of give him the first crack. But I mean, I'm going to be looking at Burke like if he looks good at AAA, okay, we got another back-end starter ready.
Yeah, so there's there's no reason to put him on the 40-man until you have to, right? So there's that aspect where you're going to have to like get rid of somebody to start him. But I mean, yeah, like if you're down to your 7th starter, like it's probably him. Like, are you going to start him or AJ Alexi? You know, I mean, I think we might want to see Sean Burke. And I will say, like, it should be a lot of strikeouts, and he's, you know, doesn't necessarily miss like as many bats as he should with like the stuff that he has. Charlotte, I'm curious to see what happens there, just because like the stat line thing is important, right? Because he could have a 4.50 ERA at Charlotte, and it could be his best minor league season. Like, because it's just brutal. It's really brutal.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember Dylan Cease in Charlotte, and it was like these stats stink, and it was like, well, he's ready. He's a major leaguer. He's ready to go. It's like this is just the environment he's in. We got a comment here from Rob Perry. Says, when is the Lockport football breakdown happening? Do you have the ring on, James, or were you in too big a rush to get here? Okay, all right. Next time, I want that monster ring on there just to try to intimidate me. That's what I prefer. And then Matzawoski says, popped in to see a Kango hat. I am disappointed.
Oh yeah.
Not tonight, huh?
I have 2 young children, and it was 6:00, so you know, like, yeah.
All bets are off there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one last thing on kind of the first 15 prospects here. I see, and I'll pull this back up on the screen. I see Jared Kelly sitting back here at 14. And my question for you is, how long do you wait on Jared Kelly as a starter, or do you switch gears and turn him into a reliever? And that's just a general question, but I feel like Kelly is a prime example here. He's a big guy. He throws very hard. The conditioning has kind of been an issue for a while. Control's been an issue. Kind of at what point do you start looking at a top prospect? I think he was a 2nd-round pick and got paid a bunch of money. And in that draft, I think there were a lot of people who thought he could go in the 1st round out of high school. You know, what are you looking at here? When do you start thinking like, okay, maybe it's time to turn it over?
Probably after this season, because I think he has two good enough pitches to pitch in relief. And like I think Jim Callis, on our latest episode that's not out yet, but he kind of mentioned it too. Like I think he thinks like reliever future is possible. There's a lot of people that do at this point. Like,
Okay.
But you know, he was better last year. It's just his conditioning was so bad. Like when he first came into the system, and the White Sox finally started like drafting preps, right? And they decided to go big on high school pitching, like when like pandemic happened and these guys can't pitch, right? So,
Right.
So I don't know if it, you know, it's just so
It's
like
bad timing.
Yeah, like their development was so delayed, and I feel like if you draft 4 of them and one of them hits, like that's pretty good. Like it is like a very risky demographic. But I mean, I thought with a fastball, like he's a fastball changeup guy. He's got a plus change, so I thought it would be fine. We'll see. I mean, they're probably going to push him to Double-A this year, so we'll find out like if he can start. But you're right. Like if he can't, I think it's an easy transition to just like start turning some of these guys into relievers.
And for someone like him, is he a fast mover, James? Like if you turn him into that, and it's like you could start turning them loose in a year, and he's up here in Chicago, and I'm screaming and yelling for him when he gets his walk-in music.
Yeah, I think so because you know, like with the starters, like you just like have to make sure they get enough innings. But I feel like once guys move to the pen, like who cares? Just like can they help? Can they help the big league team? Right?
Yeah, don't waste those bullets. Let's get up here.
Like with like Cody Hoyer, you know, like he started in college and he was terrible. And then we talked to Nick Hostetler and they're like, oh no, this guy was like really good in like 1 inning on the Cape or whatever, you know, and it's like, okay. And then he was in the big leagues like the next year. So
and good. He was good. He was good that year too.
Yeah, like it happens, you know. Yeah.
So absolutely. I'm gonna bring the list back up here for the next question. So out of the top 15 now, we're gonna go to this the back 15, 16 to 30. The first question on my mind when this list came out, I looked for him immediately. I made a fucking beetline to him. Is Yolbert Sanchez at 26? Yeah. And my question for you here is, when you're ranking a system like this, and we've talked about the various like methodologies, thought processes. Yolbert's 26 years old. He's been available in the Rule 5 draft and unpicked. At what point is this guy just not a prospect and just a guy who is housed on the 40-man currently and potentially useful in a utility role, but not really prospect status is gone? Is there like a threshold in which you say, okay, it's not a prospect anymore, it's just a guy, an org guy, but a guy we may use?
Can I say now? Yeah, so look. So I will say, like, we had to come up with 30 names, but you're talking to me. Like, I didn't rank him. Okay. I don't believe. Just because, like, he just, like, doesn't impact the baseball, right? Now, if he goes to Charlotte and somehow, like, he's hitting this year, like, yeah, I mean, he is, like, close to the majors, like, infield depth. But I feel like one thing the White Sox don't really need is close to the majors infield depth. That's like one of the things that
they have guys who are good. Who are those people?
Right. Like you got Lenyn Sosa on the 40. Jose Rodriguez is on the 40. Brian Ramos like isn't a middle infielder, but like he's on the 40. Then you have guys like Hanser Alberto, who you would definitely use like instead of Yolbert Sanchez, right? So I think at midseason, once we have another draft, he's very likely off the list. I mean, it's $2.5 million out of Cuba. Like it doesn't look great. He can defend for sure, but it's just, you know, it's like the stuff that people hated about Nick Madrigal minus the base running. He just like doesn't impact the baseball at all. And he did a little bit at Double-A. So it kind of looked like, oh, maybe like they saw something and they were right. And then he went to the better hitters environment and he just hasn't been very good. So yeah, he's on definitely the fringes of the list. And as you see from the rest of the list, there's other second baseman and shortstop that rank higher for a reason.
Yeah, right. That have kind of popped up ahead of him, newer draft picks and people that got more potential upside. Yeah, I always thought about that, like from an age standpoint or from a milestone standpoint. Like to me, being eligible for the Rule 5 draft and it passing you by, to me is sort of a milestone situation where it's like the other teams did not find you valuable enough to pluck. So that's saying something about, not that a lot of guys get drafted in the Rule 5, but there is a sort of, well, you're out there, you're available, you're kind of free to pick up if you want.
Well, it's like kind of the same thing as like why I feel like they haven't really been able to make trades. Like I think I like Lenyn Sosa and Jose Rodriguez, right? But I feel like every team has guys like that. So like those are our versions of those guys. And while the White Sox farm system's been in a place where they don't have like immediate contributors, and look, I think those 5 hitters at the top of the system are all going to play in the big leagues. I don't know definitely like I can't tell you that they're going to like reach their ceilings, right? But I think they have 5 hitters that are going to play in the big leagues, and that's something. It's just, you know, when you go to trade and you don't want to trade Colson Montgomery or Brian Ramos or Noah Schultz, it's like, we'll give you these other guys. Everybody has guys similar to that.
No, I agree with you here. And this is more of a composition of your roster and having the creativity of a guy in the dugout who can figure out how to use all these guys. I think the same way about Gavin Sheets and Jake Berger. They have no trade value, but they should be usable in some capacity in the roster, either as an up and down guy, a bench bat, or whatever. And so it'll be interesting to see how Pedro lines these guys up and kind of what his choices are, however much freedom he's given to get the bench choices, and then also how he ends up utilizing the guys. I'm kind of interested because you're right. You've got kind of these parts. They're not that far away. Some are basically on the roster already. I'm interested to see how it all goes into motion once it gets happening.
Well, and one of the things that I despise in all sports is like losing players for nothing. It like drives me insane, right? Yeah. So even like, you know, like Jake Berger doesn't have a place to play, right? And then eventually he's just gonna like be DFA'd and like be playing for somebody else because you couldn't trade him for something useful or find a spot for him. Like stuff like that drives me nuts. And I feel like we're getting closer to that with both guys. Because I actually think like Berger seems like a better roster fit than Sheets does, just looking at the composition of the roster.
I agree.
And I feel like Sheets is on it because they really like him and they'll say, oh, he's got a left-handed bat, which like I agree. Like he's been solid against righties for the most part.
Yep.
I just don't know when you would ever play him over Colas, Vaughn, or Jimenez. Like, when's he playing?
Yeah.
Whereas Berger, you could make the argument. You could, like, squint and put Eloy in right and DH Berger, you know, against a lefty.
Against a lefty.
So, right.
Yeah, I agree. I agree he's more usable, and I agree totally with your thought process. I actually wrote a blog about, are the White Sox wasting Jake Berger? Because I like you, I'll be pissed off if in a year or two he's hitting 22 home runs playing first base for Oakland. It's like, I get it. We don't have a first base spot open, but we should find some at-bats for this guy. We should find some utility for him. Yes, the guy in front of him is better than him. So what? Let's figure out a way to use this motherfucker.
Well, he seems like he's going to hit lefties, right? So
yeah. Yes.
Like, while he probably shouldn't play 140 games for you, like he could hit lefties, which is
that's right.
At this point, like that's pretty good. Like we didn't know if Jake Berger was like ever going to play baseball again, so this is probably a win.
Yeah, 2 Achilles surgeries later. Father Zoe, thank you for the drink. He says Sox are wasting Berger drink. Yes, that's because I wrote a blog about it. You son of a bitch. Thank you. I appreciate that. James, the next thing I want to talk about, and you brought this up, and this has been something that's not been on my mind too. So I'll bring the board back up here. And the discussion point here is the reliever glut. We'll call it reliever glut, but I kind of like the approach. Is we got Franklin Germain, we got Gregory Santos, and then Nick Avila is just off the list, so he's just kind of off screen here. But we have Santos at 27, Germain at 28. The White Sox this offseason went out and gobbled up relievers left and right via trade. Other teams DFAing, Rule 5 picks. What's your thoughts on that group of relievers?
Well, so it's like, look, it's like not a huge deal, right? But it's something that I feel like, and I was guilty of it too. Like I like was praising them for this because like they just never do it. And like they should do this every offseason. Like you should be able to like create your own bullpen of cheap guys if you know what you're doing, right? Like, and we all bemoan them for spending their free agent dollars on Joe Kelly and Kendall Gravemans. And look, like if you're a contender and you want to
David Robertson trading Omar Narvaez for Alex Colomé, it goes back a ways, you know.
It seems like it's the only place that they're allowed to spend at the top of the market is the thing, right?
So they do it, right?
Yeah. So like if you're a contender and you really have to have Kendall Graveman for $8 million, like I'm totally fine with that if it's not going to stop you from doing other stuff, but it clearly stops them from doing other stuff,
right?
Which is the problem. So yeah, like a guy like German and Santos, like I really like Santos. He's underachieved for sure, but these are all guys who started in the minors and now have transitioned to the bullpen, and they have 2+ pitches out of the bullpen. This is exactly like the types of flyers that you want to take. And I think they need optionable like 40-man guys. They need guys that they can send to the minors and back, and they just they do not have enough of those guys. So yeah, like, you know, it's not like a feather in the cap of their pro scouts or anything, but like when these guys are available and they're like, hey, I kind of like this guy, claim him. Like it's just, you know, like it's not. You
might mine some gold here. Like, I agree with you. The approach is so much better in my personal opinion. I think the only thing holding them back now with this approach is they have a major league roster that doesn't have a lot of optionable guys there. You've got Lambert is like the one up and down guy you can do, but you kept Jose Ruiz, but he has no options. You can't do anything with him, right? Like, so like, I get keeping him. He's fine at what his role is, and he costs almost nothing. But it also does block you from doing this. So there's a little bit of tinkering to go, but I like the approach as well.
Yeah, so Lambert's the only guy, right? I mean, in an ideal world, like you start with Santos and he pitches 3 days in a row and you send him to Charlotte and you bring up German, right? But they're like not really in that position because of the guys that they're locked into.
Right.
So while it's good that like if Joe Kelly has a DL stint, maybe there's a guy in Charlotte that you like now, that part's better. But you don't really get to exploit the rules like in the fashion that like I was talking about, because you have 7 relievers that all like you can't do anything with any of them.
Can't move.
You know,
yeah, exactly. No, yeah, I agree. They did part 1. Now part 2, they just need that to open up a little bit, and then then you're basically leveraging your 40-man effectively. A lot of years this White Sox team, and we're getting there because a lot of the guys on the 40-man now are also getting the position players are getting close to the majors too, so that's helpful. But like, we had years where there was like there 7-8 dead spots in this thing. You know,
you got
it's like
Miker Adolfo and high A on the 40-man. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, the guys are on here forever. It's like, fuck, we can't use any of these guys right now. In my thought, they have one guy who they have 0 chance of using on the 40-man for 2023, and that's Brian Ramos, and that's a deserved spot, and that's a guy you want on there. So that's fine. It's fine to have 1 or 2 of those guys that are really good prospects, a little young, but you had no choice but to protect them. It's a much better situation than it has been in recent years.
Yeah, no, I agree. It looks better, and then there's even like other like AJ Alexi. Like I don't know if that guy's gonna start or be a reliever, but like if you like him, like I mean, the worst case scenario is you have to like cut him after spring training to like clear a spot. Like who
That's
cares?
Fine. Exactly.
It's totally fine. But I think, and this isn't on the agenda, but I kind of feel like their pitching staff's done. Like if they're keeping Avila because of the Rule 5 thing, like we know we know the 13 pitchers. Like it's done.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you. I think, I agree. I think the 13 pitchers are locked in. Like, what you can go to Roster Resource right now and look at that group, and that's basically it. Like, because Liam and Garrett Crochet will be on the 60-man. Well, I don't know what the rule is with Crochet because he was hurt before. If they can put him on the 60-man and pull him early, because he won't need to be on there for 60 days. But Liam will go on the 60-man. They'll free a 40-man roster spot up. But yeah, those are the guys. And then when Crochet's healthy, then he'll be back in the mix. But yeah, that's the group. I would totally agree with you there.
Yeah, I think it kind of has to be.
Now I'm going to bring the list back up on the board because I got a question specifically about the list. Which player in this group, and when I say this group, I mean the 16 through 30s, has the best chance to be on the top 5 next year?
Easy actually this time. It's I would say Ryan Burrows, just because like, I ranked him a little bit higher personally, but then the new list at MLB Pipeline, like I've mentioned 3 or 4 times already, we talked to Jim Callis, they have him 11.
I saw that
in the White Sox system. So, he's the one guy that I guess other teams have called to like ask about that they want out of the system. So, like, I'll go with him. Like it's like a 120 WRC plus in the DSL. Like, doesn't really tell us anything, but it's better than sucking in the DSL, right? And he's,
right.
And he's 17-year-old Panamanian. A lot of those guys are like a little bit further advanced, just because like they're like little league. I guess I've always heard is like better, and they're more prepared to play than some of the others. And he should be stateside. So we're going to get a chance to, and without like Great Falls or whatever, like he might like go to Kannapolis and stink or whatever, but at least like, we'll see him. So I guess I would say him probably, and then maybe Chapei is the other one, that Chapei.
Yeah. 21.
Just because like he's a little bit older. So like if he goes to Winston-Salem and is really good, like he could move kind of quick because he's like 21 years old.
Excellent. Now, I want to get to the group of Just Missed, because I heard on the podcast you were complaining to Mike, I write this list of guys who just missed this. No one cares about this. Fuck that, James. I care about it. I can't wait to read the Just Missed, because I know there's a lot of guys in there that are either newer draft picks or have some weird situation about them. And so it's good to get some color on who's kind of sitting out there. So I got a couple questions for you out of this group, before we get out of here tonight. The first one is Luis Reyes. That's the Dominican Republic signing. 700K. He's a pitcher. My question for you is, how come a young pitcher, I think he's 17, how come a young pitcher who gets 700K, that's basically third round-ish money, maybe it's fourth round money in the draft, how come they're off the list when a fourth rounder normally could be like in the middle of the White Sox list here? Is it all just age risk related?
No, like I actually wish I would have ranked him. It's just hard, like when they sign internationally, just because like it was January when they signed, so it's like tough for me to like hike him up a list. But I mean, look, I would take him over, like I'd rather keep him than some of the 30 other guys on the list, right? So
Right.
that probably tells me like, oh, maybe my process is bad and he should be on this list. But no, like he's really young. And the one thing about him though is like he pitched like a bunch of like American tournaments and stuff. So he is more similar to like your Andrew Dahlquist of the world than Christian Mena was. Like Christian Mena signed for $250K out of the Dominican Republic, and nobody knew who the hell he was, like myself included. And Ben Badler comes on our podcast and he's like, "Oh, a guy to really watch is Christian Mena," and then within 6 months he's like on our list. So, like, if, really good, like if Luis Reyes is on the list at midseason, I wouldn't be that surprised. I just think we were super conservative and left him off.
Got it. I didn't know if there was some specific reason or another because, I mean, obviously young pitchers like that are risky, and the pitchers generally don't get the big money that the hitters do. So $700K is a lot of money for a pitcher, of that age. Like, it doesn't look like it if you're someone who watches these signings, but most of the big signings are all position players.
All the time. Yeah, they don't get much money. And that's where, like, Jorge Vera was pretty highly regarded and got $1.5 million.
Right.
It's really not that much. No.
Absolutely. All right, last one from this group. You are smitten with Jacob Burke, the center fielder out of Miami. Why is he one of your guys? Tell me why I should get on the bandwagon. I want to get on the bandwagon of one of the just missed guys. Tell me why I should get on Jacob Burke's bandwagon.
Well, so the first thing, like covering the draft, I think the biggest thing is follow the money. And he got $225K. I think the 11th rounder generally is more impactful than like a lot of the guys in 6 through 10, like for, I know you know this, but like,
explain it though.
Like how the bonus pool works. Like we gave him, so the Sox paid him $225,000. Had they signed him in round 7 and done that, $225,000 counts against the bonus pool. Since you did it in round 11, only $150,000 counts against the bonus pool, so then it's like your way of kind of doing that. So like, I actually interviewed him recently. He's a very confident, kid, he's a Miami guy, so this comp is like he kind of reminds me of Romy Gonzalez, actually. Like he's just like a good athlete, physical center field profile. I don't know how much he's going to walk, but he hit 13 homers at Miami. They think he can stay in center, and he's one of these like fire plug like rah guys and good teammates and such. So and they like sent him right to Kannapolis, so that like kind of tells you what they think about him. So I think he'll be at Winston. I think he'll have a chance to crack the list pretty soon. So yeah, like I just like guys like that, and $225K is like 7th round money. So like if you stack their draft class by money, he's like one of the 7 or 8 top guys. So that's mostly why. Yeah,
absolutely. And thanks for explaining that, because I don't think a lot of the listeners always know the little intricacies and rules of doing the draft. Dougie Fresh, thank you for the drink. He said, just wanted to hear someone say Carson Fulmer's name during a prospect-driven show one last time. Absolutely. We're happy to say Carson Fulmer as much as you'd like.
Ooh, brutal. So Jim, yeah. I don't know if Jim Callis brought that up on air or off, but he had some things to say about the White Sox messing up Carson Fulmer. Like, so.
Well, hey, that's everyone make sure you listen to Future Sox podcast just in case you get that those little tidbits.
I know, I'm trying to remember now. Yeah. But that was like in the days when the White Sox did this, and then all of a sudden the guy's in Charlotte and you're like, "No, what are you doing?" It was kind of like, oh, he's
I remember him just I remember him being in the big leagues. It's like, what's this guy doing? I thought he was a starting pitcher, and they're just like randomly using him in the 6th inning or whatever. Like in Anaheim in some game, I'm like, what the fuck? It was a weird time.
those teams that were hanging on trying to win, that's how the James Shields trade happens,
being desperate. Well, James, I just want to thank you for bestowing your White Sox thoughts to us on the Future Sox top 30 prospects. Remember, on this show, we aren't trying to be right. We're just trying to understand. Do you have anything you want to plug before you go?
No, just listen to the podcast with Jim Callis, and then I don't really know who's on next week. I haven't really thought about it yet, but we will do some more prospect stuff, I think at the end of March, where we do our like positional ranking. So we'll I think there's enough guys where you can go 10 in the middle infield, 5 on the corners and in the outfield corner. So there's usually like 6 or 7 articles, and that pretty much gets all of the good prospects in the system, like when you do it that way, right? And you get 10 starting pitchers and write them up and split up the relievers. So we'll do that in late March, and then affiliate previews will be coming out too if the White Sox ever release minor league rosters. So.
1 minute before the season starts, James. That's when they'll give it to you, right? I've heard those stories.
Well, and sometimes, so I will say, usually we have friends there where like I could get the list to write it, but I would never publish like until they publish, You
got to wait to release.
But it's like, my God, guys. Like, I'm like calling hotels to get information about who's staying there. And stuff. Like, it's good.
The absolute worst.
They make things really hard sometimes.
James, thanks so much, man. I appreciate you coming on. Good talking to you, brother.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You got it. That was James Fox. Next week's guest will be my old friend, White Sox Dave. I don't have a single note written down for what we're going to talk about next week, but I know my man's going to be ready to talk about White Sox stuff. I can't wait to get down with him. One last thank you to James Fox. Thanks to all the 108 family who's up in the YouTube comments. Appreciate you smashing the like button, comments, notifications, definitely the super chats. I like to drink some white wine with you guys, so I appreciate all that. Thanks so much, boys. Take care. Well, boys and girls. I'm saying boys because I used to say boys to the 108 boys, but it's just me here anymore. Anyway, take care, everyone. Love you. Bye-bye.